What do you see as the next big advance in technology which could help beat poverty?
Well, the big advance is probably going to be giving poor people access to technologies that are already there. So energy, mobiles, clean water, and those are the technologies that really matter in the short term. In the longer term, we have waves of technology approaching us. Nanotechnology, new forms of biotechnology, a wider range of GM. All of those are going to present threats and opportunities. You know, we may well need nanotech products as part of our climate change adaptation work. Yeah. It worries me that large NGOs like Oxfam don't make a priority of understanding new technologies, or even old ones actually. And that's probably a gap we should be addressing.
Great to have you here, Duncan. Just a few questions about the publishing of your book, From Poverty to Power. We're delighted to be publishing the second edition. And we're also absolutely delighted that Oxfam has felt able to invest in you as a writer to produce such an expensive piece of work with the space to explore issues, looking from the ground up at Oxfam's work and how it will impact on policy and programme work around the world. Can you tell me what Oxfam expects to get out of the publication of this book long term?
The origins of the book are actually quite ancient. So it was an attempt to do another edition of something called the Poverty Report from the mid-90s. The Poverty Report, written by my predecessor Kevin Watkins, sort of pulled together our policy positions on a lot of international issues. And as I got to work on this version, I decided I wanted to go further and to actually look more in terms of how development's happening on the ground. So we sort of married the international policy issues and the understanding of the processes of political, social, economic change which constitute development. So I don't think Oxfam entirely knew what it was getting into when it started me on this exercise, but a lot of people in Oxfam contributed, and I think its initial value was actually before publication. So you had this enormous discussion within an organisation where often people just concentrate on their day job and don't spend a lot of time saying, well, what is development and how does it happen? So I think a very useful internal exchange, and with partners too. So that is surprisingly rare in the development constituency. We're all too professional, in my view, not sufficiently amateurish and wanting to talk about big ideas. The use of case studies was important in that it starts dragging people's experience, which is often in people's heads, and getting it out there and socialising it and getting people to look at experiences on the ground. And since the publication of the book, I've worked much more on case studies as a way of thinking and communicating. The main impacts I think the book's had within Oxfam, and you'd have to ask other people, not the author really, is it helped us think about the interaction between citizens and states. So if you think about it, it came out in 2008. We were still in the aftermath of a sort of Make Poverty History campaign, which focused much more on the international arena, you know, debt, aid and trade. The book said, all very important, but actually development is primarily a national process, the interaction between citizen and state, and what can an international NGO like Oxfam do to improve that chemistry. And that was a kind of shift in thinking, which I think has really fed through. It partly reflected what was going on in Oxfam. You know, I don't want to do attribution on this, but it's been part of a move towards thinking much more about national politics and national social change, which I think is you can see in Oxfam now.
Well, Duncan, you're well known now as a prolific and enthusiastic blogger on development issues and other things as well, I note. Perhaps you could say a little bit about how you see those kind of new media interrelating with the work that you've done in the book, and whether you're getting good feedback from readers of the book that are through that blog. How does that work for Oxfam?
Yeah, I think interrelating is the right word. I mean, the blog started off as just a straightforward let's promote the book thing, which was fairly instrumental and kind of not a good way to use social media in my view. And, I just started using Twitter about 6 months ago, intending to promote the blog, and sure enough found that wasn't how Twitter works, and actually Twitter has its own logic. So it's more like a family of ways of communicating rather than one promoting the other. What the blog does well is immediacy. It is a form of communication and exchange, but not a great one. You very rarely get more than 5 comments on a post which several thousand people read. but it is a more flexible form of communication. What it doesn't make you do, which a book does, is to really sit down and say, what do I really think? Yeah, that's sort of going back to real basics, coming up with something like active citizens and effective states. You come up with loads of different ones like that when you're blogging, but nothing really substantial. So I think they're very complementary. The blogging is lots of watching and commenting on events, rapidly assimilating and spinning new publications, new reports, a bit of exchange with the public, or in my case more the sort of development network. But you need a foundation, and the foundation for me has to be something more substantial. And I've just been very lucky that I've been able to do both. The blog also is a fantastic first draft for a new edition of the book. So basically, you just go back and you see what you've written about, you get all the links and the sources, and you've got your archive ready-made, and then you just turn it into something a bit better written, and then you've got your new chapter. So it's a very good, handy way to take notes as you go along.
So, Duncan, are you promising us a third edition of this book then in 5 years' time?
Well, as well as publishing this book, I'm publishing a 4th edition of the book I wrote in 1991. So I think books don't go away. And you're always faced with either I do a new edition or it dies. And it's always somehow easier to do a new edition than to let a book die.
Great to hear that, Duncan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.